Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Q&A. How have these ended up becoming like a once in a month kind of thing? I do want to go back to doing these weekly, but I guess I've had a lot on my plate recently and I want to talk to you guys about stuff that's happening on the channel just before we get into some good old Guild Wars 2 discussion. First of all, there will be no X2 coming up today. I'm actually currently recording this after about 14 hours of being awake. I'll explain the specifics on the next episode, but basically I've had to do a lot of grind. The channel over the next week or so should be interesting too, as in like 2 days. A fantastic game I've been looking forward to for a while will be coming out, known as The Legend of Grimrock 2. I did an LP on this a while ago, and I'm so pumped for the sequel, which I definitely plan to do a series on. So, yeah, I'm sort of juggling a lot of balls right now. You guys might remember a few months ago as well, I've been talking about a new Guild Wars 2 series I'm really keen on doing, and I don't want to talk about specifics just yet because I've been a bit sporadic with when I've been working on it, but all things told, hopefully that will be coming soon. And as a final aside, the podcast, the VisualWood Podcast, has been back for about 2 weeks now. You can find episodes either in the playlist on my channel, or you can find them over with Map Visual. So there's been stuff going on, and I'm a little busy, but I wanted to throw one of these out. So let's go with the first question from Painted Dog. Bear in mind, most of these questions are a month old. There were some even saying to me, hey, what do you think the feature pack's going to be like? And I'm like, oh my god, wow, this is a very old question. So Painted Dog said, at least, WP, do you think ArenaNet should bring back the mission system from Guild Wars 1 where you needed to make a group to get past a mission and to progress the story along? I understood a lot of people hated it because they spent a ton of time sitting in the mission area spamming LFG, but I ended up meeting and making a few new friends on the way back in Guild Wars 1. People mostly do solo stuff in the living story now. It just seems to make people more antisocial. One of my biggest criticisms with Guild Wars 2 has always been it doesn't encourage you that well to play with other people. The game feels like you're playing around other people rather than with them, and I think forcing people to be in parties with one another to do the living world wouldn't necessarily fix that issue. But you're right, it would make us a bit more social, and it would make it easier to form communities, and it would add more purpose and merit to guilds, which currently, you know, is lacking in the game and can cause people to leave very quickly because they don't feel that sense of community. Overall, though, I think the living world does just fine as a solo kind of thing, just like the personal story was meant to do fine as a solo thing, and there's the option to scale it up if you want to play with other people. But if they did eventually go this direction, like one plan I thought was kind of interesting would have been to have these hard achievements all require parties of people. I think this game wouldn't suffer as much as GW2 did in terms of finding people to play with, for two reasons mainly. Number one, there's much more infrastructure in Guild Wars 2 to find other people, mainly through the LFG system, which we don't really talk about anymore, but is very effective at what it does. It's even got a living world section up there. I think it could work quite well, but also the fact that the party size in this game is 3 people less. There is a big difference between having 8 people in a party and 5 people in a party. With 5 people in a party, you're really only looking for 4 other people in the world to play with. And it's not even necessarily true that we'd need full 5-man parties to do living world stuff, right? Regardless, maybe living world isn't the best way to get people to band together, but because ArenaNet puts so little focus on dungeons for so long now, it does seem like that kind of stuff is lacking a little. I'll talk more about dungeons soon in another question. And I guess this is this question now. It's from Alex Poonera, who says, hey, Wooden Potatoes, do you think they will ever release raids? Like in World of Warcraft, I remember raiding with my guildmates and getting such a great feeling of learning and achieving. In Guild Wars 2, it feels like it has no depth. Will it get raids, or will it stay how it is? I have a lot of opinions on this topic, but the basic answer to your core question here is yes, I do think they will get raids. If anyone's been out of the loop, they have hired a raid designer for the company. There has been discussion on the official forums between players and the devs on the topics of raids. But I am a little bit cautious as to whether this is really what the game needs. Now, I'm not telling you guys I would hate raids. I would be incredibly excited for raids, and I think that they would satisfy a serious itch many of us in the community have right now. But I am a little bit sick of half measures. I don't think raids necessarily are the only thing that could fix Guild Wars 2. Like you say here in your question, I miss that feeling of learning and achieving. These things aren't necessarily exclusive to raids. For ArenaNet designed dungeons better, then you could certainly have that feeling here, and perhaps at the more convenient expense of only having to find 4 other people instead of a massive amount of other people. I have seen with the raiding topic come up recently in the community, quite a few people asked the very simple question, what even is the difference between raiding and dungeons? Think of raiding as primarily a much more hardcore type of content. I would at least hope it would be far more punishing. Think about instances as we have with dungeons, but if you fail, if you mess up, if the boss kills you, instead of it being la-di-da-di-da, we'll just go back to the waypoint and try again and bang your head against the keyboard for long enough, eventually you'll get through the encounter, you'll probably be kicked. And in many MMOs, there are even mechanics revolving around how you can even access this instance in the first place. Even GW2 dabbled with this. It had endgame areas that you had to pay to enter, so there was that big risk, that big fear of loss. If your group, if your guild, if your team never managed to complete the content, you could be kicked out and maybe even be time gated. If you look at the way that ArenaNet have set up their guild system, it certainly looks like raids could slot in very easily there, and if they were like other guild missions, you can probably expect weekly gating, daily gating on some level for rewards, or even maybe access to the missions. So that's the primary difference between raids and dungeons as we see them. It's hardcore content. Further, another huge distinction is just the player count. Okay, raids tend to have that more epic feel because there are much higher party sizes. Instead of having 5 people, you might expect a 12-man, or in more ridiculous cases, even higher than that. Though I doubt ArenaNet will go so high. And yeah, this is exciting. But I am a little bit sick of half measures with ArenaNet. They've always said, look, we're a very iterative company, and I suppose that was fine before the game came out, and I wasn't seeing how quickly they flipped from one idea to another. I look at the game right now and I see dungeons which have a very cool core idea but was implemented and then very quickly abandoned. I see fractals which had a very cool core idea but slightly failed to hit the mark. Some people still play but largely now have been abandoned. I remember quotes from when fractals came out from them saying, oh, we'd love to update fractals more than we'd love to put more dungeons in the game. Fractals are so much more modular, they're so much easier to add to, and they set up all this infrastructure for it and then they've abandoned it. And I even see stuff like the world bosses, the big dangerous encounters, like Tech when Tech originally came out, like Worm when Worm originally came out, before these things were nerfed to be easy and become grind for those still participating in the content. These were phenomenal things ArenaNet had created, and again they have base in the game now to expand upon those systems. They have the opportunity here to allow guilds to pop not just regular versions of any world boss out there, but maybe even hard mode versions of these world bosses. They have cool idea, cool premises, they show us that they can kind of work, and then they abandon them, they flip to something else, and now raiding is this next thing. And so yes, I say to you guys, I'm excited, but what about these other things? I mean, for real, I would love them to just stop and look at any of them, take one of these ideas, see where it slightly went wrong, and stick with it. And I'm not saying forever. If it's obviously a complete failure of an idea that the community is raging about, fine, you can move on. But don't look at low metrics because of, say, you know, the second release of Super Adventure Box, or because when the Worm came out, a very small percentage of the community was actually playing the content, and then immediately drop it like a hot potato. Try it, because there is great value there that you're throwing in the bin, much to our dismay. But yeah, as they explain more about raids, I'll probably do a video entirely dedicated on it, what we can expect, and even what ArenaNet have proved at least one point in time they were capable of doing, because GW2 at least had some very raid-like content I'd love to share with you guys who have only just come for the second game, because there was some great stuff there. The next one comes from Ahaja007, who says, "Hey WP, in the recent days there's an alarming number of people selling dungeons. In fact, so much that there are more people selling dungeons in LFG than people looking to pug. In my opinion, of all these people should get some kind of ban, like a ban through LFG, because dungeons, as much as they are face roll, they are still a team effort. What is your opinion on this? Should ArenaNet do something?" I don't think they should take punishing action towards any of these people. I think it's really cool that in the game there is opportunity for people to provide services like this. One of the main things I miss about this game compared to its predecessor, compared to other MMOs on the market, is the lack of reason to communicate with one another and band together, as we've already discussed in this video. The fact there is no direct player trading was a huge blow to this. The fact we only have the trading posts, yes, I appreciate this is far more convenient, but I do miss this idea that people were offering different items and services to each other, and there was a lot of communication going on. So the fact that there is still this vague notion of running through dungeons, I really enjoy. I think that if players are skilled enough to complete dungeons with slots still available in their party, and there's no kicking nonsense going on, there's no exploit nonsense going on, they were just skilled enough to be able to pull that off, and there is an actual market of players for them to sell that path to, then that's awesome. That's something extra that the end game has to offer. The person buying is happy and the person selling is happy. This is a win-win for everyone. And for what you say about how there are more people selling than there are people pugging, well, what you got to remember is when you try and sell one of these paths, it can take a while to get your customers, right? So you tend to see that the people selling paths stay up on LFG longer than the people just pugging, because someone puts up an LFG for pugging and they tend to fill very quickly. This comes from someone who runs dungeons most days. I've eased off over the past month or so, but you know, you put an LFG out, it fills very quickly, and that's why it just looks like there's more selling going on than legit runs. If there's some community-based extra reward for people doing harder stuff, you know, soloing and duoing is harder than doing it with 5 people, and if there's that built-in reward there, I'm not going to take that away. I just did a whole video on that topic where I want more officially sanctioned reward. The only issue with this does come in when people are kicking and exploiting, and then maybe your question, should ArenaNet do something? That does come in. Maybe they should start to support it more and look into it and spend some resources there, but I think that's a trickier topic. Next question is a really weird one that comes from Zybert, who says, "Hey WP, if 2 characters from anywhere across the TRA could come together to form either a good or villainous duo, who would you want them to be? Base it off of anything, whether their banter back and forth would be hilarious to listen to, or maybe if they came together they would be an unstoppable force of evil." I'm not a particularly creative guy, but the first thing that came to my mind was Norgu and Goren, who were these 2 heroes we were introduced to in Nightfall that had very opposing personalities. One of them was an actor who had much panache and drama about him and also was a complete fool. And the other one was a pea-brained but simple barbarian, but I guess with a heart of gold. These 2 were brilliant. They have so many choice lines of dialogue. I would love to see them in some way, you know, nowadays be able to travel around Tyria and just see their perspective on the world and the kind of things that they'd be getting up to. The really cool thing about Norgu was that he had some very interesting lines and insightful lines because he had such a rich vocabulary, and then at the same time some outrageously funny lines too. So here's a couple of selections from the wiki. One of them, he says, "Of the 2, I vastly prefer acting. Life is scattered, unimaginative, and often abandons plot with no rhyme or reason. Acting always carries through the plot, and in the end, unlike life, the heroes always win." And then at the same time, he'll come out with something as brazen as saying, "My only regret in the theatre is that I could never sit out in front and watch me." Like, he's so brilliant. I would love to see something like that. I feel like, am I too cynical? Why do I feel like it's so much easier to pick strong characters from the first game than it is in the second? I just find most of the personal story characters blur together, and is that because I didn't pay as much attention when I played GW2, or is there a serious underlying reason there? I don't know. The final question comes from Choco Muzi, who says, "Hey WP, recently found out that we haven't discovered all the Mystic Forge recipes yet, and when asked what these recipes were, they said, and I quote, 'is the Christmas present you always wanted but never received. Do you think that it could be a special back item like a cape we were asking for since forever but never got, maybe because of this reason? Would love to hear your thoughts.'" Unfortunately, as exciting as the Mystic Forge is, I don't think there's some crazy new hidden item in there like a cape that we haven't seen. I think that we can kind of assume now that the game's been data mined enough that people would know any shocking surprises like that. Of course, I'm just going on other people's words. I've never data mined myself, but that would be my assumption, or at the very least that players have tried a staggering number of combinations of items. The Forge is a really cool gameplay idea that I'd love them to go back to, probably around the time of an expansion, in which they just flesh it out with a ton more recipes. One thing that many of us who create our legendary weapons always miss, a part of the process of creating a legendary legendary weapon is the idea of even finding the recipes in the first place. Now, you might say, oh, this is really unintuitive. Players have to look at guides online and so forth to find their legendaries. And in a way, yes, that could be seen as poor design. But something that was really cool they did about it when the game came out was all of this stuff was buried so deep in the Forge. Players just had to figure it out from trial and error. I remember a quote from a dev saying that all the recipes were like hinted at in various areas of the game. Like, for example, the idea that to get your vial of Quicksilver or whatever, maybe somewhere there was an NPC who was talking about combining various items, and then you'd try it in the Mystic Forge and oh, there you go. But that never really seemed to come to fruition. Regardless, those very first few people to create legendary weapons, they had this whole process, this whole exciting idea of literally dumping stuff in the Mystic Forge randomly and seeing what would come out. You know, you see a recipe there that's got 250 ecto plus a bunch of other crap. You don't know what's going to come out, but you try it. You know, you take that leap of faith. And it would take many of those and the collective knowledge of the community to finally figure out how to craft these things. It's an interesting idea, added that little bit of extra prestige onto the original legendary weapons, and that is prestige in an element of the game that has completely died away now. Completely. Until you hear something weird like this, where it's, oh, there's still some hidden recipes out there. I tend to be more in the camp of people, though, who would say, oh, these are just really basic recipes. These are recipes, for example, that turn regular cooking foods into feasts, right? And the truth is just that this is such a bad food that no one has ever bothered to upgrade it, or, you know, whatever your equivalent actually is for the Mystic Forge. I think it's more that kind of stuff, just tearing things up, and maybe it's tearing up some kind of Winter's Day related item, and largely I'm cynical as to whether it would actually be exciting, I'm sad to say. Hey, maybe I'll be proved wrong. Maybe we'll find some crazy item in the Mystic Forge and a dev will say, oh, this was here since launch, and we'll all slap ourselves and it will become like the trending thing for a few weeks. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you're all kept in the loop. As I say, Grimrock 2 will be coming out very soon, and I'm very much excited. It's just pretty busy times at the moment. I hope you guys have all been having a great week, and I guess I'll see you next time. Have a good one, everyone.